and welcome to episode 8 of Moving Parts. My name's Toby Beth Johnson with Burnt Store Title of Southwest Florida. Your host today, Abby Hamilton with Peacock Premier Properties, the real estate gal next door. Today's special guest is Zach Polak with ABC Insurance Group. I think you definitely need to sit up, turn that volume up, so that you can pay attention to the ABCs of insurance here in our specialty area of Southwest Florida. Find out just how easy it is to get homeowners insurance, flood insurance, auto, and all the other types of insurance that you need. ABC Insurance Group makes it easy as well. ABC. Stay tuned, find out how complicated or easy insurance can be, just like income taxes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to episode 8 of Moving Parts. We are very excited and happy to have you here with us today. I'm Abby Hamilton, Realtor with Peacock Premier Properties, and I am partnered with Burnt Store Title of Southwest Florida. We are always here to help serve your needs, and we are grateful for you being a part of our podcast. If you're just joining us, make sure you catch some of the previous episodes, as there is always something that will benefit you or someone you know. Well, today we have Zachary Polak from ABC Insurance Group. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
We have
Happy to be here.
Lots to learn or to talk about. Obviously, insurance is always a hot topic in the real estate world, and particularly in Southwest Florida. Our area is unique, and these communities have things that may not be applicable in other parts of the United States. So we will surely talk about what sets us apart and how homeowners and future homeowners can benefit from some of this knowledge about what we're going to talk about today. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess we can jump into that.
Yeah,
part.
we like to jump right in.
So we have a lot of people that are moving down from, our northern states down to Florida, trying to catch some of that sunshine. And
well, your family's previously from...
Right. So, okay, we can start there.
Yeah.
I'm born in New Hampshire.
Okay.
My family, we're northerners, displaced northerners, moving down here. I mean, maybe we found our home. Been here for, 30 years or so. So I've grown up here. I'm more or less a Floridian at this point.
Okay.
I consider myself a Floridian. We've lived in the area for a long time. I guess a little bit about our agency.
Yeah, absolutely.
My dad started ABC Insurance Group. I want to say it was in 2007. Before that, he was a lawn care guy, so he decided he wanted to get out of the sun. It was beating him up pretty bad, but he wanted to get out of the sun and get into something that brought you into the indoors, into the air conditioning. And so it's an interesting time to start a business in 2007. It's kind of bottom floor, economically, but we've been growing ever since. He started in maybe a 10 by 10 room just himself, and now we're in a 1,800 square foot office building, 5 employees, and very busy.
And a couple of those employees are yourself and your sister,
right.
So it's really family owned and operated.
Yeah, so we are family owner operated. It's my sister and I that kind of run the day to day. Our dad, he still handles a lot of the financials and the backgrounds of things, but he's kind of stepped out of the limelight a little bit, and we're in there and kind of in the day to day dealing with all the fun insurance things.
And your office covers multiple types of insurance, correct?
Sure. Yeah, so we do primarily focus on personal lines, so that's your auto insurance, your homeowner's insurance. We also do liability insurance for, say, a business. Mm-hmm. But I'd say our bread and butter is homeowners.
And what sets you apart from, say, I could list off a bunch of different insurance companies, but what would set you apart in the fact that your office does things a little different, right?
Well, so I guess we would be called like an independent agency.
Okay.
And so with insurance, you have a captive agency, which is your Allstates or your State Farms, where you go to them and they're pretty much selling their one product or their one company. With an independent agency, and there's a lot of us around here, but with an independent agency, we are associated with many different insurance companies. And so we can write policies with, when someone comes to us for a homeowner's quote, for example, we're taking all their information once, but then we go out and distribute that information with our insurance partners, and in many cases coming back with 10, 15 different quotes.
So they can really pick out what option is best suited to their needs rather than just getting them one to go by.
Exactly. And so a lot of times, we'll boil it down to maybe like one or two different options, just because, sometimes price is such a sensitive thing, It's like if we have one option coming in at $10,000 and another one coming in at $2,000, then probably going to focus on the $2,000 one a little bit more.
Yeah. Makes sense. And sometimes people feel like there's a loyalty to sticking with one insurance company forever. Have you seen that be the case, or do you find that like it's really a benefit to the customer to kind of keep up to what those changes are and the competition around for the insurers?
Yeah, it's unfortunately.
Okay.
You do see, I've had customers over the years with, one thing I remember when I first started insurance, which I guess is about 13 years ago, that's how long I've been doing it. When I first started, we had a older gentleman come in. I want to say he was probably in his 80s or his 90s. And he was pretty upset about his homeowner's insurance situation. He had State Farm. I'm trying to bag on them, but he had State Farm, and at that time, State Farm was kind of withdrawing from Florida. And so they had non-renewed his insurance policy. And he told me, he's like, Zach, I've been with State Farm since I was 16 years old.
Wow.
Which is like, 70-something years. It's a long time.
Yeah.
And, he was rightfully, at that point, it's like, geez, it's like, that's like a...
Yeah, you feel like you're grandfathered in by that point.
It's a long-term relationship. It's a couple marriages, maybe.
Yeah.
But, yeah, anyway, so, I told him, I was like, unfortunately, it's like the insurance companies, for better or worse, they look at you as a risk. Mm-hmm. Which is, and it's not always what people want to hear, because they're like, oh, well, I've given them all this money over this time. And, the insurance companies, they're very black and white, very analytical about things. And, if, they decide, just because you've been with them for a long time, that doesn't necessarily get you a better rate. And so that's why it can be beneficial to, kind of go out there and do a little bit of homework.
Yeah.
Of course, with an independent agency, that's why, that's one of the things we'll kind of plug in there, I guess, is with an independent agent, we're not writing with just one company. It's, our priority is to you, the customer, and trying to find the best solution.
Yeah, because not one size fits all in that.
Right, yeah. One company might be like, yep, we're going to raise your rate or whatever, or maybe, whatever. Maybe they're just going to drop the policy or something, but we're able to kind of shift gears and find something else.
Okay. So when you spoke earlier, you mentioned, they're going to analyze the potential risks or the risks that are blatant obvious depending on where we're at and the home. And so let's talk about some of those risks that we're seeing now. Insurance companies are cutting, back in some areas, or some of them have even retreated from Florida completely.
Yeah.
Giving some more slim pickings for options. So let's hear what's kind of caused that, and maybe what some ways that home buyers can do better when they're trying to pick out these homes, and what to look for, or even home sellers, what they can have ready to help home buyers be more easily able to attain homeowners insurance.
Sure. So I guess we can start with like what to maybe look for.
Yeah.
And so what I usually tell my customers, if they haven't, maybe picked out a house yet and they're just saying, hey, Zach, I'm looking to move to the area. What's something to maybe keep in mind? And, I understand there's usually, budget constraints and, just what the market has available. Mm-hmm. But I usually try to drive people towards homes that maybe are slightly newer in construction.
Okay.
It really depends on what the priority of the customer is. So, some people want to be near the water. That's closer you get to the water in Florida.
Yep.
You're going to have to worry about flood insurance, and your regular homeowner's insurance is going to be more expensive.
And they say that a lot of the older homes were by the water because when this area wasn't populated at the time, everyone's like, oh, great, I want to be near the water. So
that's why you
they
come to
built
Florida.
out, and now we're going farther inland because there's only so much land to build on.
There's only so much water.
So you'll find a lot of the older homes, or you're going to pay a pretty price tag for one of the newer ones.
Yeah, you can. And so usually I say, maybe look for something a little newer. Newer construction, I would probably put within the last 10 years. Again, that's not always going to be in the cards, so to speak. But that would be something to keep an eye on, just because what I've been seeing recently, a large driving factor in what the insurance premiums are, or just the age of the home.
Okay.
Newer homes, you get significantly less expensive than you could have the same exact floor plan, could be built exactly the same.
Okay.
And if it's 30 years older, it could be twice as expensive.
Okay. So keeping the age in mind, and when you're looking, or right as soon as you get that inspection period, I would highly recommend calling your insurance agent to just run things by them. Even before you put in an offer, it couldn't hurt if you have that good relationship established.
Yeah. So a little bit about, a lot of things what we'll ask when someone says, hey, I'm buying a house. One of the first questions that we will ask are, okay, have you had your inspections done yet?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have people that have not had their inspections done yet. And we're still able to kind of take a peek and kind of give them a rough idea of what their insurance premiums might end up being. But that can be difficult without the inspections, depending on the age of the home.
Yep.
So something that we're looking for are a wind mitigation inspection and a 4-point inspection.
Okay.
These are really important when it comes to homeowners insurance in Florida. It's always something you're totally unfamiliar with if you're moving from outside of Florida into Florida, because that's not something that they look for anywhere else. The insurance companies ask for these inspections kind of for two different reasons. The wind mitigation inspection is an inspection that is used to look at and determine the wind resistance features of the home.
Okay.
So they'll look at the age of your roof, how is your roof, how is the roof decking nailed into the trusses, how are the trusses attached to the walls. They'll look at the if you have hurricane shutters, they'll look at all these types of things.
Impact windows and things
exactly. And the protection credits. So it'd be impact windows or hurricane shutters or whatnot. And so depending on what happens there, and sometimes I'll tell people, it's with a really great wind mitigation, you could be paying $1,500. Same house. Terrible wind mitigation inspection, you might be paying $4,000.
Okay.
And so it's a lot of times what people say, we're just looking for an estimate. I'm like, it's it's hard.
It's hard without having something concrete done.
Yeah. And the other inspection is really quick, is your 4-point inspection.
Yep.
That's usually on homes that are over 20 years old. It's a lot like your regular home inspection, less nitty-picky.
Because there's 4 points, right?
Right. So they're looking at the 4 main systems of the house. They're looking
Okay.
at your electrical, your plumbing, your air conditioning, and your roof.
So big ticket items.
Exactly. And it's a lot of people confuse it with their home inspection, that, the comprehensive home inspection, where they're going through and they're nitpicking every little thing. The purpose of that inspection is to find out about what you're buying. You don't necessarily want to show that information to the insurance company, because then they're going to nitpick it, right? 4-point inspection is more looking at the whole thing. You're like, okay, is your electrical system in good working condition? Is there any hazard electrical things that could cause fires, or is there a sign of arcing or whatever? Same thing with your air conditioning, your plumbing. Is there leaking pipes? The roof, is there any signs of leaks, damaged shingles on the roof? So they're looking for those kind of over larger items that could cause a problem.
And you're saying those are typically over 20 years old on homes?
Yes. So typically kind of the rule of thumb is 20 years and older is
Okay.
when you would need that.
Okay. And with wind mitigation, is there a time period? Is there a preferred age for the wind mitts?
So yes, in 2002, there was a pretty sizable building code update in Florida, and so a lot of times we'll call it the FBC building code update or whatever. And so anything that was built after 2002, you're pretty good chance that you're gonna qualify for all the credits that they look for on the wind mitigation.
Okay.
If it's built prior to that, that's when it's important to get that wind mitigation done.
Okay.
Because then they can look closer. Now there are some caveats
Yep,
there.
exceptions. Yep.
Gets a little in the weeds, but for example, impact shutters or hurricane impact windows, that was not a building code back in 2002, 2003. I want to say it became building code in 2014. And so if your home is like a 2016 house, you're going to get that credit no matter what. But if it's a 2007 house, you may have the shutters, you may not have the shutters. There's no guarantee because it wasn't in code.
So it's good for home buyers to look into the age of the home and specifically talk to their insurance agent in regards to once they have the home inspection or are scheduling the home inspection, if they should look into scheduling the 4-point or the wind mitigation inspections as well, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And something I've seen come up too are the elevation certificates. Can we talk a little bit about what that is and why that could be a benefit for home buyers?
Yeah. So we're talking about flood insurance.
Yep.
So for flood insurance, we typically try to get our hands on an elevation certificate. So an elevation certificate is used to determine how high the house is sitting above sea level. Obviously, if the concern is rising water, the higher you are,
The better.
usually the better off you're going to be.
Probably the cheaper too.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. So the elevation certificate is pretty much, if you're in a flood zone, get an elevation certificate.
Okay.
That's kind of my advice.
Okay.
It's not 100% needed to get a quote, but in a lot of instances, you can get a quote without an elevation certificate, but it can save you money. Not all the time. As a just an anecdotal experience for myself, recently Charlotte County was remapped. The flood zones were changed, and my home was in what we would call an X flood zone, which is a lower risk flood zone. And then I was changed into an AE flood zone, which is considered a higher risk flood zone.
So pause real quick. So an X flood zone, for those that might not know, would not require someone with a mortgage on their home to have flood insurance coverage.
Exactly.
So they wouldn't have a premium. That's an additional coverage that's added. So in your case, it switched to an AE flood zone, you're saying.
Yeah, so I was landed in a situation where when I bought my home, I was not required to carry flood insurance. It changed, and then my mortgage company was like, you need to carry flood insurance now. So when I ran my quotes without an elevation certificate, I was about $3,000.
Which is a significant premium for the year
it's
to
quite
add that
expensive.
on.
Yes, it's quite expensive. When I had my elevation certificate done, and I paid about $300. I don't know what the normal rate is, but that's about what I paid. I went back to the company that did the survey for my home, and so they gave me a little bit of a price cut, I believe. However, when I had the elevation certificate done, it brought my rate down to about $1,500.
Okay, so that cut it in half.
Yeah, and so I made a huge difference in what I pay.
And especially with all like the remapping and just a lot changing with flood insurance, peace of mind could be, it might be a few $100s to kind of budget that in, but it's something you can have on hand, because something that I've heard recently, which I won't speak too much on it because I want you to have that spotlight, but certain insurance companies, if you have a mortgage, may require you to have flood insurance.
Yes. Okay. So there is a very large insurer in Florida. They're called Citizens Insurance. They are the insurance company right now. The state of Florida, I'm going to rewind a little bit. So I want to say it was about 20 years ago, the state of Florida was going through a similar insurance crisis, I guess you could call it, where a lot of insurers were wanting to withdraw from Florida. And so they basically created the insurance company Citizens. It's not run by the state. A lot of people think it is. It's just they were created by state legislation. They are more or less, and it sounds kind of bad, but they're more or less the insurer of last resort. And it's by design. It's not because they're bad. They actually did really
I've had
good.
customers that had them through the hurricane. They actually, didn't know any different, and they said it was great. So
yeah, they did phenomenal. Like, honestly, out of all the insurance companies I dealt with, they were one of the top one or two.
Okay.
As far as resolving claims and just
but they're
being on
not
top
meant
of
to
things.
be the first choice.
Right. They're not meant to be. However, insurance premiums have been rising in Florida, unfortunately, and Citizens has had a lower rates because of that. Everyone's kind of raised above them. Anyway, so a recent development with Citizens is that they now require, if you're in a flood zone, you have to carry a flood policy to be eligible for Citizens.
Regardless if the home is paid for or not? Or
Correct. So your home you could pay cash for your home, no lien or anything on it. And if your insurance agent, they might look at your rates and say, okay, well, Citizens is $2,000. The next best thing is $6,000. So pretty big. That's a pretty common situation. And then we may look at the flood insurance and we're like, look, if flood insurance is another $2,000. So your whole all in, you might be $4,000. It's obviously going to be less expensive than this $6,000 option.
But it would be required at that point.
Yeah. And so it can be a little discouraging for people because maybe they don't want the flood insurance and they just didn't want that extra cost or what have you. But that is something that the reason Citizens is doing it is because they honestly are trying to, for lack of better terms, it's just they're giving an additional stumbling block to going with them.
Okay. Well, and so there's a lot of variables to consider when getting insurance. And obviously that's a wonderful benefit to go to trusted sources that we have in our area and that know the area too, especially you've seen a lot of changes. You've seen the impact that most recently the hurricane has had on this area.
Yeah.
And people were learning more about their policy while dealing with getting those needs filled from the damages that Ian had on their home. So can you speak a little bit about the hurricane deductibles and coverages, or maybe what you'd recommend for those needing to make sure that they have better coverages on their home in case a natural disaster like that comes again?
Yeah. And so I see a lot of the time where people are buying a home. It's a stressful experience. There's a lot going on. And then, they come and talk to us for insurance, and then we're like, oh, you need all these inspections, you need this, you need that. And they're like, oh, well, up in New York, we didn't need any of that. And, it just becomes, like, frustrating, right? My recommendation to people is just, just take the time. I know it's not what you want to do, but just take the time and learn about what's going on with your insurance policy in Florida. Insurance, the overarching concept is going to be very similar from state to state. So generally, in general terms, your policy up in, Massachusetts is going to be somewhat similar to the policy here in Florida. Now, you do have some differences. We have deductibles that are different here. We have a hurricane deductible, which can be separate from your standard, what we call an all other perils deductible. So a lot of people may not realize that right off the bat. We do talk about it, but again, there's a lot going on, so you might not be absorbing it all right at first.
So maybe if you get your insurance policy and settle into your home, maybe go back and reread and ask more questions if it's a lot to digest at the moment, because it's a lot of important, and right now has been a deal breaker in a lot of people's lives trying to figure out their course.
For example, your hurricane deductible it's typically a percentage of how much you're insuring your home for.
Okay.
So if you're insuring your home for $500,000, the hurricane deductible is typically 2%. So that's a $10,000 deductible, where your regular deductible might be $1,000. So the hurricane's coming and you think, oh, okay, I have a $1,000 deductible, and then all of a sudden the adjusters come out and then they're telling you, oh, your hurricane's $10,000 deductible, and it's like,
yeah,
a little bit of shock. Any good insurance agent would have already talked to you about that. Again, it's just find an agent that's willing to take that time and explain what's going on, because there are differences.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And being that we are in hurricane season, while people might not want to hear it, that's where we're at. But as a way to help our customers, I know there is some, and you can speak better on it too, if there was a hurricane to come, don't they lock up writing policies?
Yeah, so sometimes we'll run into that with real estate closings that are happening this time of year. If a storm is approaching us and they have the big cone, we joke about it, it's like the cone of uncertainty, where's it going to go? But usually if we have one of those that are heading towards Florida, many insurance companies will suspend binding, which means that we are not able to issue the policy.
Okay. And do you have any advice on what buyers should do at that point?
There's not a whole lot you can do, honestly. It's just kind of, I mean, if you see there's a storm out there, we got to try to get the policies issued. In some situations, your realtors will already be familiar with that situation because they've been in it. Or, if you're working with like a mortgage broker, if they're like a local mortgage broker, they've dealt with that before as well. And so they'll try to push things to the point where they can get it on our desks and we can get the policy issued before we have any binding restrictions go into place.
And then in the other case, I've seen it and dealt with it after when post closings, then we just have to reevaluate that everything's taken care of and ready so that we can get it closed and in the condition it needs to be in, so we can get that insurance and coverages.
In some instances, not all the insurance companies close at once. So I've had times where we've had one lined up, they closed, and so then we have to go find the next best thing, which might be more money.
So with flood insurance, I want to touch on this again. Our area is such a range of elevations from, people will pull up the property records, or they might have us do that on our end, and they may get very concerned if they understand that an X flood zone, or I won't say that everyone understands, but a lot of people understand X flood zone. They just automatically are like, okay, great, I won't need flood insurance.
Right.
That's peace of mind.
That's the biggest thing a lot of people look at. Is it a flood zone or is it not?
And I have a lot of people now, because of everything that's happened with insurance, they want me to look at a home and they want me to eliminate the other options simply because they don't want to have that extra expense. Granted, mapping can change and there's a lot of variables at play. However, sometimes there's a misunderstanding between the AE elevations where it might say 8 AE or 11 AE. Can you define or share a little bit about what that is for a consumer standpoint?
Sure. So you have your flood zone, which is typically that letter, or letter combination. So X or AE. Those, we talk about those a lot just because those are the most common flood zones we see in our area. If you're right on like the Gulf of Mexico, that'll be
is it like a hazard?
It's like a wind hazard area. So that's a different flood zone. But I would say like 99%, like you have to be like literally on the water, because even like 100 feet back, you're going to be in a regular AE flood zone. However, sometimes people have questions about the number that they see on the flood zone if you pull it up on like the property appraiser website. So like, what is that? Does that mean anything to me? That is called the base flood elevation. And so that's what you're saying, like an 8 AE. So the base flood elevation is effectively when FEMA, because FEMA is the agency that they come through and they map the flood zones. They're the ones that determine the flood zones. And they figure out, okay, how much is like the 100-year flood, where is the water going to rise? So that's their estimation. Like that's how high water would rise in a flooding event in a particular area. So, different neighborhoods can have different base flood elevations. That number can be important with the rating of your insurance because they take that number and will compare it to the actual elevation of your house.
Where an elevation certificate would be helpful.
That's where the elevation certificate comes into play. In years of in our past, that used to be the only thing they would really look at. What is your flood elevation and what is the base flood elevation? Sorry, what is your flood zone and what is your base flood elevation? And then what is the elevation of your house? More recent years, they don't take that number into as much consideration. They also now look at your distance to the coast. Or
not even just the coast, any kind of body of water.
The source
correct?
of flooding is really what it is. Yeah. So, for example, I was talking about my house earlier. At the end of my street, there's a tidal canal. And so that became something that is, unfortunately negatively impacting me because that's tidal water. And that's where the water is going to be coming from when it floods my neighborhood.
Okay. So there's a lot of variables when looking into flood insurance, and your price can range drastically depending on multiple factors. So if you are in an area that requires flood insurance, you definitely want to get your quotes, because that could be a deal breaker for some, depending on how much that premium could be.
Yeah, and something that's I think is really important to touch on is question for your realtor and for you is to find out if the seller of the home carries a flood policy.
Yes.
Because in many instances, if they do carry a flood policy, then you can assume their policy or assume their rate. That's a process that your insurance agent can go through on your behalf. We just need a little bit of information about that the seller's insurance policy. But I've seen some instances where if they come in with a brand new policy of their own, it might be $4,000, or the seller's paying $500. You can get that $500 rate, which is a big deal.
And that's something when I go to list a home, if they're in a flood zone, that will ask for that flood declaration page to include into the attachments. So that's already something ready and on hand for home buyers to have and take to their insurance agent of choice. Please note, everybody, that flood insurance is important regardless what zone you are in. Water is a common aspect around here in Florida, and while we like to predict and be prepared for what can happen, extra caution and being mindful and extra prepared are always highly recommended when looking into getting flood insurance. If you can afford it and want peace of mind, that's something you still might want to look into. So, Zach, what is some of the best advice that you can give to customers looking or maybe reevaluating their insurance policies?
I would say one of my biggest points of advice would just be to get an agent that is willing to sit down and review your policy with you, and give you that opportunity to have a discussion, really.
Okay. And what are some questions that you would, if they don't know where to begin, what are some questions that you say maybe point out are some good ones to ask?
Yeah. There's a few. So you could ask your agent just to hey, can you go through this line by line? And then that conversation will prompt more questions. It always does. If your home has a pool and a pool cage, it's not uncommon to have a policy that does not include your screen enclosure by default on the policy.
And that's something that's come up, I'm sure, since the hurricane.
Yes, so there's some policies that won't write them at all. There's some policies that will just include them at a set limit. So maybe when you bought your house 5 years ago, it was $10,000. Well, to replace a screen enclosure now,
it's a deal. It's a bargain.
It can be like $25,000, $30,000 for the same cage. So reviewing that coverage to see, and then of course there's also policies out there that include the whole thing.
Okay, so really setting up an appointment time with your agent to go over what the policy is and what it covers more specifically, because just paying for a premium, taking the policy and putting it in a folder when you need it is not ideal when, of course, when you actually need it and really should know what it includes. Yeah,
I had a lot of calls right before Hurricane Ian hit, and people were like, hey, I'm good, right? Or, it was like a last minute thing.
Okay.
And
you don't want to have that feeling of stress.
No.
When something already is going on that you need to get prepared for and take care of your family. So.
That's right.
Well, thank you for your time. What's the best way for people to contact you if they have more questions in regards to their insurance?
So there's a couple different ways. You can call us on our phone number, 941-255-5663. We have a website. You can Google us. That's probably actually the easiest way.
Which you'll find they have a very great reputation with all of their Google reviews, so good job.
They take pride in that. We are probably one of the highest rated agencies in our area.
That's awesome.
We work really hard to,
provide that
do
service.
Right by our customers, and I think it's like the proof is in the pudding. Just go read our reviews.
Yeah. Well, cool.
Really
so website, phone number, and then of course ask for Zach or any of the agents at your office.
Yeah, everyone. We're a small agency. We all work closely together. Feel free to ask for me, but everyone in our office is licensed, and so they'll be able to answer your questions adequately. If they won't, it's like we're always learning as well. It's to this day I'm learning things. If I don't know, I'm like, it's a great question. I'll find out and get back to you.
And I think that's a great mentality to have. Always be learning, because things are always changing. So wonderful. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time on our show. And
thank you, Abby.
As things change, you might be back here to share some more information with us. So
there's a lot to cover. So
thanks for listening. We hope you gained something valuable and something to share with others as well. please like and subscribe to our podcast, Moving Parts. And if you have anything that you are dying to hear about, just reach out to Toby Beth or myself, and we will try to make that happen for you. Thanks so much.
Hey folks, thanks for sticking around. Toby Beth Johnson again, Burn Store Title of Southwest Florida, with your title tip. Homeowners insurance, flood insurance. Do I need it? Don't I need it? You're getting a mortgage. You're buying your house for cash. We recommend homeowners insurance, of course. Can we help you get that? No. But what we can help you get is the survey of your property. We can also order that elevation certificate that is going to help you with your flood policy with your homeowners insurance. If you're getting a mortgage on your house, please know a boundary survey as well as an elevation certificate is mandatory. For further questions and discussion on flood insurance, homeowners insurance, reach out to Zach at ABC Insurance Group or Burn Store Title of Southwest Florida, your #1 team in title.